So a couple of things. It could also, people can stack them in a corner. We can do a table. We'll see that. On our drawings, we typically always put what the prior one is. So within ODOT, a drawing is for a specific project. And so if there was a project in 1960 at the intersection, and then there was another project in 1985 at that same intersection, there'll be two maps. You'll have the 1960 map. You'll probably have a prior map to the 1960 map, which was the original road. And then you'll have a 60, and then you'll have an 80 map, all stacked on top of each other for the same area. We typically look at the prior map and we address that. And so you can go backwards or forwards on the maps to see the historic parts of the roadway. We usually put townships, range, sections if they're the drawing name and the right-of-way project name or number. That wasn't part of this. We're talking monuments. So a lot of times monuments might be put in the table. And the reason why that is a lot of times we'll do tables for our control recovery maps. And so then it's just a matter of taking that table and moving it over to the right-of-way map. So it's a lot easier. Okay, some other different line styles. They've created a city limit line style, another city DOT pattern or dot pattern for something. I haven't used that one much. Oh, it's placed on the city side of the line. Okay, so you put the two, yeah. County lines, state lines, city limit added to or put on with next to a DLC. So we try to keep those up on our newer maps and different ones. And old maps, it is really helpful too, because back in the day, they may have outlined where the city limits were in 1938 when they did the original map. So historically, sometimes you can go back and see, you know, hey, when the highway was there, the city limits was only at this spot. Now they're, of course, a lot different. So. So here was what I was talking about, DLC on one side, regular government lot on the other side, two DLCs together. That just kind of helps historically looking, trying to find documents sometimes. It's just good to know. And as part of our description, typically we will say what DLC it's in, even though the sectionalized system is our more prevalent now. Township lines. So non-surveyors were a rectangular survey system in Oregon and in the West. Those were 6x6 squares, 6 miles by 6 miles square, broke into 36 sections. So a township line runs east-west, north-south every 6 miles. And then you have sections inside of that. There's 36 of them. Then they can be broken into quarters. And then they can also be broken into quarters of quarters. So you have quarter section line, then you have 16th line. That's called aliquot parts is the way they talk about it. And then a center of section is usually put in as part of that quarter section line to distinguish where it's at property-wise. So English alignments, which we're into now, and you'll see why we talk about this as far as separating it. So English alignments are a 3-digit with a plus to 100th. We label our curves. We label our tangent bearings. We do not put distances on our tangents because we use the stationings for your tangent distances. Stationing is typically to 2 digits, you know, the plus. Cardinal ones, every 500 feet, we usually put a denominator or a label on it. The ones in between we don't, which are at 100-foot stations. And then the 500s is where we put the we label it. Coordinates, we put PI coordinates on there also so that the alignment is you can use coordinates to recreate it or its relationship if you need to, as far as bearings and that, which can change. And they're usually to thousandths of a foot, 3 digits. So, and another thing is that all of our stationing faces a head-on alignment. So that helps you know what direction things are going to. So ODOT, like many DOTs, 80s, 90s, 80s. Anyways, we're all going to metric because the federal government, FHWA, we were going to push to change everything over to metric. So metric is different, where metric has 2 digits, then a plus sign. And so there's three digits to the right side of the plus sign. Station ticks are at 20 meters apart and 100 meter spacing between the major ticks. And the coordinates are usually expressed to the millimeter or 3 digits also. So, and same thing though, stationing does face ahead on stationing through there. So there are metric ODOT maps out there, and they just have to be converted. So it's one of the things we have to do, but they're still just as useful. It just has different, units of measure. So the current method of showing alignments on ODOT drawing is, like you say, stationing is increasing from left to right as station text to face the direction alignment runs. ODOT standard alignments, stations to increase north to south and west to east. However, this isn't always what happens. There's some back in certain days that go backwards for some reason. And also there's a couple different roads that this was supposed to kind of apply also to mile points, but there are several highways that the mile points go backwards. And so sometimes you'll have a plan set or you look at things at mile points and stationing is running opposite direction as the mile points are. So you might want to watch for that too. Stationing for English alignment shown to the hundredths, coordinates 3 decimals, metric, which we talked about. So now we're kind of getting into some more of the typical things we'd see now with our current right-of-way engineering stuff. We have proposed taking lines, and they're shown with a greater weight than the existing lines. And the right-of-way drawing emphasizes what is purchased rather than what is existing. So our maps that we have are our inventory. So they're a living document, and their intended purpose is to accentuate or show what we're acquiring, and for later is what we own or maybe what we're transferring or selling. And so their purpose is for inventory of those, and that's what we want to show predominantly. So we have a permanent easement and temporary easement line, which is a dash. We've got a proposed fee taking line, which is solid. And then proposed access control line. And then we have, here you can see how proposed the fee and easement taking of the text with station and offsets. So when we get into here, you can see the things we were talking about. We've got the grantor's vesting name and the current deed. We put remainder area. A lot of this came, I think, in the past. It's getting more relevant, of course, today, as many with planners, as far as what's buildable area and that sort of thing. So, and that remainder is outside of fee takings, and typically we'll talk about that, but we typically will use the current assessor's map and use that as the basis for the square footage. Now, unless based on the deed or based on something that you find egregious error with the assessor's map, then just put down where you acquired or where you calculated that area from. So if the assessor's map's really off, then you can say calculated from, you know, deed calls or something like that. We'll talk about that too. This flag over here is called an access reservation for when we have access control and we give them a reservation for a driveway or an access. It has the stationing and it has the width. And the flags only go to the right-of-way line. They don't go clear out to the center line because that's where it's at. Permanent easement for slopes. All the permanent easements, temporary easements are labeled with exactly what they are. I'll drop down here first. This is file 001 of this project. And parcel 1, which would be fee in its square footage, and that's the little circles, because we put all of the parcels into one deed or one file. So parcel 1 is fee, parcel 2 is this permanent easement and its square footage. When the project's over, we've acquired the property, we deed record this map for our inventory to know what deed it was that we acquired it. So say that we came up with excess, there was an uneconomic remainder, or in discussion we ended up buying this person out, but we don't need the property for the project, but we have to buy them for negotiation or uneconomic remainder. On the map, we'll call that a separate parcel and it'll be the excess. If someone comes to us and says, you know, hey, we got someone that wants to buy it, you know, then we'll usually do up a description or a map or something, and we put a note that it's to be sold. You'll see on some old maps, there was stuff that says to be sold in 1965 or 1984, but there's no recording or nothing else there. So someone was intending to buy it and it probably didn't happen, but it was kind of sketched on there. But at some point it's still considered as probably surplus and we'll try to sell it. So we put the proposed sale to be sold, we draft that on there. And that's just something that kind of earmarks it that it's going to happen or they're trying to do it in case anybody wants to know for inventory reasons or something. Once it's sold, older maps you'll see have typically a purple line. So we'll get into older maps here a little bit. We put this bright red dashed line around it. And then we'll say sold. Usually we'll say sold to who, and then what instrument number it was. So common utility lines. So you'll say, well, why right-of-way maps? Why do we care about utilities? Well, so we use the topographic map that is given to the survey group, and we show the lines, and we have all that grayscaled in the back. The reason why we like to have a lot of this also is so that you can see what sort of things are inside of a take. You can see if there's utilities. You can see if there's something you need to go around. You know, I'm going to go right through a gas vent or a well or other things. And so it helps us understand as we're laying it out, but it also helps the right-of-way people. So, you know, after this, I just realized I'm out of step because I was going to do the process PowerPoint before this one. So sorry about that, everybody. I just realized I screwed up. Well, we'll get to that one after this. So I don't know where my brain's at. So we got our common, you know, topography features, and all these are going to be in there based on the survey. We have it grayscaled in the back when we print it. But when we're laying it out, you can turn stuff on or off and see if we're going around stuff or running into a building or, you know, light poles or different things. So that topographic information is very useful for our layout. And it's also useful for others when you're looking at this. So color shading has been around a long time. We developed a new pattern, a new way to do it for the computer. And we use a pen table, it's called, that does all these different things. And so what we try to do is shade different colors to all the adjoining properties. So when you're looking at it, and if it's all turned on and going, you know that, you know, file 4 stops right here, file 5 starts, you know, file 6. So you see all those elements in there, and you can you definitely know kind of those limits. It's a much easier visual thing, so it doesn't just all run together. So fee takings are solid, and you can see there's a slight transparency to it, so you can kind of see through it. It's not overpowering. Permanent easements are a solid outline for their color. And then temporary easements are a dashed line, so it's easy to distinguish which is which, you know, that way. And you can see there's a full view of a large one of our roll maps. And we'll break it down. You'll see on a lot of our old maps, there's what we call mirrored text at the ends on both the left and the right side. There's your front title area that has all the project information and all that sort of stuff. You've got your main body, which is, you know, what's going on, and then you have end titles. So the mirrored text at the end was placed on the Mylar copies or paper copies. And so what it was for at the time was because these were called roll maps because they were rolled up in a stick or on a tube, and they were stuck in a cubby hole. You pulled out and rolled them out. So when you pulled it out, you could look at the side of it and you knew exactly what map it was because it had all the information on the either end of it. So no matter which way it was rolled up, you had that information. The front title area broken into sections. So here we have, you know, of course, us. We have each project has a name. Typically, it has to do with the nearest crossroad or something like that. You know, the highway number, ODOT's highway, or the highway number. This is a unique project just for this map and this project that's going on. That's the Salem section of the Salem-Dayton Highway. So it's that piece of that highway. You give a county, who drafted it. Typically we'll have original draft date on there also. Basis of bearing, coordinate system, field notes if they put them in, you know, for the control, not the topo typically. But we have a drawing name, right-of-way project number, access control saying that we do have some, and that's the line style. The CAD file name, print date, and a scale. So that's kind of the main project information for the map. Then we have a revision history and a status stamp. So every time we touch the map, for some reason, after we first created it, we come in here and put this on every one of them to let someone know that it's been revised and what we did. And status stamp on our new ones is, so these are a living map, they're potential to change, and so they're always active, and so they're not stamped as a final document because they're never final. I'm actually do revision histories on 100-year-old ones, except they're a raster inside a CAD. But if we change something on that, sell something, I put the note on there, republish it, and so the inventory is up to date. We try to keep it that way. So ODOT right-of-way maps are a living document. No professional stamp is affixed to them. And we have each one, preliminary is used before the map is completely published. So say you have early acquisitions and you start a map for a project, but you acquire 2 parcels and you're not really going to get heavy into the rest for another year or something. Essentially what we say is if there's a description that is sent in with referencing a map, then send in a copy of the map. If this is a preliminary, meaning there's more to come, put the preliminary stamp. When you turn in a drawing with a whole project, all the descriptions are written, you use the active drawing, which means things still could change, you know, if we have to adjust something. Then once we deed record it, the project's done, everything's acquired, then we change this to this right of way, and it means, okay, the project's done, but there still could be changes. We could sell something, we could trade something, who knows? So that map still is living. We have a basis of bearing insert. And so we typically will show, you know, we have basis of bearing talked about up above, but this is kind of the schematic, what we used for the basis of bearing. That helps people retrace to get oriented in the future if they need to. In the body of it, like we talked, we have township and range, section if it's small enough or in segments, the drawing, and then of course our right-of-way project number for this project, and then prior right-of-way files. And if this is a big map, we try to do that about every 36 inches along it, just so it's easy to get reference to. Of course, got to have a north arrow. And same thing as place those about every 36 inches. We don't get quite as many big ones like that anymore, and electronics a little different, but these old ones that are broken in a lot of pieces, when you zoom in, it's nice to have those every so often so you can make sure where you're oriented. End titles, again, end titles were something that came out of the older long maps. We still leave it on there, so when you're at one end of it, you know, you can still see the other. And a lot of this came out of the old roll maps, because if you had a 20-foot long map, you were going along and you were rolling the other end back up as you were moving down the line. So it kind of helps you keep yourself oriented as you're doing that. Like I say, not as big issue now with electronics. But like I say, we haven't changed a whole lot. We've kept a lot because it works. And so we keep that look and feel consistent as much as we possibly can. So existing topo, we talked about. We have a pen table that when we reference that in, and it makes the topography go gray shaded. So it's, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's down there so you can see it, but it's not overpowering all the other stuff. You see these funny dash lines, kind of throws people. We call them a false call. And what that is that when we don't know the exact sideline of something, we will do a false call out to another number, but yet that property is limited by the vesting deed. But we don't, this way we don't leave gaps or overlaps. Well, we wouldn't have overlaps because it's bounded by the deed anyways, but there's potential for leaving a gap and not acquiring all the property we want. So we use false calls to go beyond the property line to ensure that we get all the property that we want or need. There's no dash lines up here. The reason why is because they're using a call that goes clear past it as part of the constant width. Here's kind of a conglomeration of an area where we have total takings, but then the total takings is broken into 4 parcels based on the design and what we want to keep and what we're going to transfer. And so it's really nice to do this prior to writing files like this, because it helps us get rid of the excess property later. If it's not broken into what is used there, then we have to go and write a new description, and sometimes it comes out a little messier than it would have been before. Because this portion of file 59 is really all that we needed for the highway itself, other than the utility easement that's back here. But as far as fee, that's all we needed. So the other two parcels were broken into the easements. So if we do sell any excess, we can say, you know, subject to easement of parcel 2, da, da, da. It makes it a lot easier. Parcel 4 then can be surplus, and it's easily described as parcel 4. In a complex one like this, we'd like to have that. Now there's others that are entire takes like this. It's just the whole file. That's just the way it is. If we're going to access the other part down below, we can still, it'll be easy to describe. So, and you see the areas that were bound to be sold or whatever. So these these purchases here, we're acquiring access right. Now, as you see here, it says access only. We've kind of quit using access only and just call it access. It's a right-of-way appraiser thing. So anytime we're going to change or acquire access rights in any way along a property, we now put in a parcel 1 and call it access. That way the appraisers right away, everyone knows that there's a change happening and they need to compensate, address the change in their access right. On city streets, side streets, those sort of things, many times they'll want to block off or control the access around the corners onto those city streets. So we'll put stoppers and a stationing, and that will acquire that access right up around the sidelines so that we can restrict, you know, driveways and that sort of thing for safety. So you'll see these stoppers with the stationing, and that's where we've acquired that access right. This is a canceled file, so sometimes things change, like you say, for different reasons. All the information is removed basically as far as what the files were, other than the numbers, and they're just crossed out. Areas that are being sold, we put heavy dash lines. Areas that are being transferred to counties or cities, we do the same type of lines. We'll label what we have done. This was relinquished to Clackamas County. This one up here was sold to Gene Keegan. And so it's easy to follow back through. They have deed recordings and everything with them. Most all of our maps, including our old ones, there are some that don't, you'll see them being deed recorded afterwards, and they'll put the acquisition deeds that were acquired on them. So when you're looking back at maps and you say, well, you know, ODOT, can we get that map or that deed from you? And we usually will say, well, can you go to the title company, please? You know, it's deed recorded, and ask them for those copies of the deed. Right of Way group, not my group, but Right of Way is the owners of the deeds and any of that information. And so you kind of have to do a public records request with them. Now, I will say that there's some older maps that have just a J number, which was a judgment or a condemnation. Up until 80s or 90s, maybe, those judgments were not recorded with the county clerk. And so we may be the only ones to get those for you unless you go to the court and ask for that judgment number and kind of know roughly the year or something. So those we work with everybody to get the judgments on those older maps because they weren't recorded in the counties as in the clerk office. Sorry. So also you'll see some maps, and another way you can do if you're in a city, you're doing so maybe like say these ADAs or something like that, and you have lots and blocks. You can do just by distance from the corners of the lot and block. 15 by 20. Basically chunk taken off the corners. Those are approved methods, and they can be done. And you don't have to have a center line or retracement or any of those things like that. Only because it's a platted. It's fixed, it's locked in place, and you can use that as the references. So there is that opportunity. You can do stuff like that. Again, refer to the right-of-way engineering manual, refer to examples, check with your right-of-way engineering surveyor in your region, whoever you're working for, double check. So moving on, rural projects typically are a little bit less complicated, and they have larger takings. We still do the gray shading, show existing features, and access control, all that good stuff. Sometimes you'll see dimension arrows trying to define an area, like this one is a wetland mitigation area. That's all it's supposed to be used for. So we'll put the note in there just because at the time we know why it's being acquired and what it's supposed to be used for. We may shade it, put the note on there too. So it's always easy to define it or say, put something in there at the time when the project's going, if we know it. So here's going to show one about some of our bigger ones or crooked, where we have match lines because all of it won't fit the project. So it's broken up into match lines to pick up the sides, and you'll have match lines, AA, BB, that sort of thing. So you look at those to kind of line things up that way. Okay, so historically, like I said, we had the big roll maps and sheet maps. What was called an A map was a 36-inch wide map. B map was a 24-inch wide. C maps, which we have some, they were 12-inch width. When R3s were 12 by 24, and when R4s were 11 by 17. So these 12-inch ones kind of came in odd, and I think it was just a timing, what society and what was available. So that was something that they used. And these the old map numbers, I don't remember if I talked about it other places, but they came out of when you have a 1A or 2A, 13, 24, it was what those were was cabinet numbers. One was the cabinet number. The next one was the cubby hole number, and the last number was the map number that was into that cubby hole. So, map 1 was, 111, cabinet 1, cubby hole 1, map 1. Clear up to, cubby hole 1, map 36 that was created and stuffed in that cubby hole. So that's where those came from. Since we don't create paper maps anymore, we don't print them out, we don't have cabinets or cubby holes, we decided after almost 100 years that we're going to change our map naming convention. And so as of August of 2019, all of us in the state, right away, we got everybody's buy-in. And so we've changed our map numbers to that right-of-way project that is unique to that map, that project. And we stuffed it in here and called it RW right-of-way project number M for map. Right now it's 4 digits, but we're in the 9,000s. It'll eventually roll over into the 10,000 or 5 digits. In the past, you had to request a map number. A map number because you didn't know the sequence. Only the maps and plans knew the sequence of what the next map number was. So you don't have to do that anymore, but we do have you send in a form that says I'm creating a map. So, okay, so with the new format though, because we are using electronics, we can still do 36, but it's less than 200 inches, or a 24 that's less than 200 inches. But like if we're doing the large interchange, you saw how it was broken up and you had the match lines and that. Now you could run just straight through, and then you could do, say, 2 11x17s to get the legs, you know, and you have it as pages 2 and 3. So because we are doing PDFs and electronic sizes, many of them requested that they do their county surveys as 18x24. So we could also do an 18x24 border if that enough detail can be shown. Again, let maps and plans know what you're creating. So the older right-of-way maps prior to CAD, like we already talked about, there's a lot of different things. When you see on there, there's project numbers. There was 2 sets of numbers. One set of numbers that was on there for a file was the field file. The other set of number, the RW, was they were kind of the headquarters file. And so there was 2 sets of them because it would go back and forth. So that's why there's 2 different numbers on most of the older files. And then this was a file summary sheet or a salmon file for each one and a cover sheet. So shading, here's an old map where they used to use color pencils. You see here they had 5-digit numbers. And then you see the RW number written in there. You see the deed recording numbers. So they look, even though they're almost 100 years old, they look a lot the same as we do today. So when you're doing research and looking these up, you look at these files, look for their deed recording number. You could look for the RW number if you need to request something or look up something from right away, or have a question when you bring it to us. Most of these were hand drafted, but they did a pretty good job overall. So. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of my arrows here. I'm getting short on time, so I'm cruising. But you can see square footage, you can see all the different things. Everything that's there on our newer ones, it's handwritten in there, and it's good, you know, yeah. So the main difference in the standards, the older map was the way the access was written. There was, prior to, they had a stamp there. There was all these little symbols that were stuck in there. And what they meant, you know, restricted access, farm crossing, access, private access limited, commercial access, and commercial access limited. And so the legend showed what they were on the maps. The symbols kind of carried through. You'll see them in there. So that just means double check what the access is through the deed. Did we acquire an access right? Did we give them an access right? So that's stuff the right-of-way agents want to look for. And we need to kind of know also. So here we're talking about the different sizes. Constructed line versus located line. Located line is rerunning knowing the center line and our right-of-way. Constructed line may have that same information, uses that, but it might be more, we didn't put the road in the center of the right-of-way. We changed the curves. We changed the tangent of the road itself. So typically a constructed line is not a right-of-way drawing. It is a constructed line of where the road is. A lot of the constructed lines were inch 400 because they didn't need the detail. Most of the right-of-way ones are inch 100. Right-of-way and widths may or may not be drafted on the maps. You may have to check those, the deeds. Always check the deeds, always check the deeds. I can't say that enough. The maps are great for a reference, but what was sold in the deed is what was sold or acquired. So always check that. So the right-of-way maps, they were produced to facilitate the acquisition of right-of-way, right-of-way files, quarry sites, stockpile sites, state land or parks, often drafted on other maps like the one ours. Usually those are noted on there also. Constructed lines show the alignment of the highway as it was done. And then other historical alignments or research, can be found in there too. So be careful, approach with caution, ask questions, research. All right, come on.
One question for you, Mike.
Go ahead.
So
yes.
Explain arrowing into a line or a monument or feature. Like what terminator is used, what leader, is it a curved or is it a straight line?
Oh, that can be a preference. There's in the ODOT drafting task menu, there's curved leader lines or straight leader lines. You could put it as a note. It depends on really what you're trying to show, just so it's not cluttered. But there's not anything off of the ODOT drafting standard or task menu will work. So. Yeah. And I'm getting down, 3 minutes. Okay, we'll see. So stockpile sites, maintenance sites, usually they're referenced to a larger map, whatever is there, or the larger map will show which one to go look for the other map. So now this is an older one, I think. That showed, it kind of referenced it in there. It was a constructed line or didn't have much, but it did show that this other information was on a 1R map versus on here. They kind of coded it in, but then they point you to that for real details. So your located line maps, they'll show the new right-of-way layout, file numbers, and they're really the true right-of-way map. Now, you're going to see this here, and don't beat me up. This was a stamped map. The reason why it was stamped is because a surveyor sent the crews out, and they actually put monuments in the ground and filed this as their survey. To us, it is still living, but they did file this as submitted to the county in 1967. Not all of our maps did this. Not all of our engineers or surveyors did this back in the day. And so today we do a monumentation map and all that separate from the right-of-way map. So some of the maps are stamped, but that's why. And you'll see that there was a monument set and that sort of thing. Look for these notes, pin set. They made a lot of notes. Some of those were recorded in the county, some were not. So be aware of that. There's a reference to highway designation files. You can look, ask about those. It was designated number 140. So they'll put notes on there like that. You'll see notes about abandonments, stuff that we've transferred in sections or areas in these old ones. This one was going to be abandoned and then it got canceled. Revision dates typically are up front there. There's reference to adjoining maps, usually come off of there, part 1 or 2, and which ones to look for the other part. Your access symbols, double check. Did they get an access or didn't they? Did we buy access control or not? Purple or stuff that was sold, I was talking about, we put the big dashed red line. Back in the day, they used purple. So when something was sold or excess or transferred, it's outlined in purple. And then new reference stuff that's added in later. Look at how stuff fits. There's a lot of information sometimes, and sometimes there's not enough. Here's a note to a newer map. Railroad encroachment maps. They'll have railroad files. See this map here for the railroad encroachments. Very tight. So construction line is put in red. So this one they drew in and said they changed a bunch of stuff, made a bunch of notes on here. So look on the front in different places for that. Detailed various center lines drafted, different stuff that went on, issues. Look for that on the maps. Standards have stayed a lot the same, but sometimes like this is a mess. So they've done a lot of different things there, but still the deed holds. Remember, the deed holds. So, all right. So any other information, we'll get back to us, and I am 1 minute over.